there, I'm Karen O'Connor and I'm here to introduce you to the Farinelli exercise. So Farinelli was a famous castrato who lived in the 18th century, and this exercise came to be named after him because he reportedly performed this exercise daily. Farinelli came to be known as the silent breather because he was able to execute these extremely long, impressive, florid passages on what appeared to be a single breath. But in actuality, he was maintaining an elevated sternum and some lateral expansion. So it looked as though he was never inhaling when he took what we call partial breath renewals. These little tiny sips that you can take when you can't quite fit in a whole breath renewal or complete breath renewal. I will talk in more detail about partial breath renewals in a near future video. But in the meantime, let's talk about the Farinelli exercise. So in the Farinelli exercise, the breath cycle, which is the inhale through the exhale phase, is divided into 3 phases evenly paced over a given count. The first phase is the inhale phase, in which we go from what is essentially empty, we're not really empty, but empty, to full over a given count. Again, we start usually at 4. We'll get into this more in a moment. So we're going to go from empty to full, and we're going to pace that breath evenly. We're not going to take a quick breath and then have to slow down afterwards. It's all very, very evenly paced, very, very controlled. Now here we really want to make sure that we're not over inhaling. We want to make sure that we're not feeling this sense of air coming all the way up in here and it's sort of filling up our trachea and our supraglottal vocal spaces. Because what will happen is when we overfill like that, that's going to trigger a reflex of the epiglottis to come down to try to cap off that air. And that's the opposite reflex of what we want. We want everything in the vocal tract to remain very, very open and free, as though we're still inhaling. In the second phase of the Farinelli exercise, we call that a retention of the air or a suspension of the breath cycle. Now this phase is unlike anything that we actually see in singing, but it's a very, very critical part of this exercise because what it's going to do is it's going to train our inspiratory muscles to maintain that lateral expansion for much longer than we would ordinarily when we're just breathing shallowly or breathing for speech. So this phase is where we basically stop breathing. But we're not holding the breath. We're not holding it here at the glottal level. We're not holding it at the mouth. We're not really holding the breath. I always like to imagine my vocal tract as being, let's say, like an empty tube lying on the floor. And inside that tube, there is air. But unless there's some force acting on that air to move it in or out of the tube, it just kind of sits there. And so that's kind of how we are here. We're basically putting the inhale posture on pause, pressing that pause button. And this is the most critical part of this exercise again, because now what we're trying to do is we're strengthening the inspiratory musculature. They're not going to get this kind of workout simply by inhaling and exhaling. They're not going to get this workout by panting exercises, for example. So we get to this middle phase and we basically put that inhale posture on pause for the count, starting off with 4 again. And the final phase of the Farinelli exercise involves the exhale phase, in which we go from essentially full to empty over a given count, evenly paced again. We never want to force the air out. We want to let it out. We don't want to forcefully expel the air and then find that we have very little to expel at the end, and then we're left sort of gasping and very desperate for the next breath. Everything with this exercise, all of this breathing, this coordination, is done in a very, very controlled, calm manner. I almost liken it to like yogic breathing, where you're just sort of thinking, you're counting, and you're focusing only on the breath in, suspend, out. Very, very calm. And the great thing about this, beyond how it actually helps us with our singing and supporting our tones, is that it changes how we think about the breath. We're no longer thinking desperate and gaspy for the breath. We learn to be able to control it. We learn to be able to take a complete breath renewal, a very complete breath renewal where we allow the lungs to fully fill up with air and the diaphragm to descend as low as it will. without forcing it. And so now, when we get to the next breath cycle, that is the next inhale followed by the exhale, we're going to increase the count. So we're going to go from 4 inhale, 4 suspend, 4 exhale, immediately in the very next breath cycle to 5, 5, and 5. And what we do is we go up to the highest count that we can manage without getting to that point where we feel as though we're desperate to take a breath at the end or we're overfilling. And that's going to take some coordination. It takes time to figure out how full is just full enough and how empty is just empty enough. So go to your maximum breath cycle count to the point where it's comfortable yet challenging for you. For a lot of singers, especially when they're first starting out with this, they really only get to about 6 or 7. So 6, 6, 6 or 7, 7, 7, and then they feel the need to make their way back down. So they go from 7, 7, 7 to 6, 6, 6 to 5, 5, 5, then back down to 4, 4, 4 again. Over time, the goal ultimately is to be able to extend this breath cycle to perhaps 10, 10, and 10, so a 30-second breath cycle. And I would encourage you to actually use real seconds as opposed to just kind of counting in your head and not knowing whether from day to day your counting is at the same tempo. So you can also use a metronome for this. That would be quite useful. That way you have some sort of objective way of verifying that you're making progress with this exercise. All right, so let's give this one a try. So again, we're going to inhale over a count of 4, and we're going to suspend the breath cycle for 4, and we're going to exhale for 4, right? I'm going to pretend like I'm doing this first. I'm going to count it out first so you can see this. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, suspend, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4. So you see how my ribs didn't really move as I was in that middle phase? That's the idea here. That's the inspiratory hold that we're trying to train so that we can maintain that for a little bit longer as we sing, a little bit longer throughout the vocal phrase. So now I'm going to actually do this exercise for you. Now you've got an idea of how we're going to do it. Ready? Okay, then the next breath cycle I would do 5. So let's pretend I didn't pause here. It's really hard to stay still in front of the camera. One of the things that you will notice when you get to these longer breath cycles, these higher counts, is that you're going to get to this middle phase. And you're going to come to a point where you're thinking, am I inhaling? Am I exhaling? Is air moving? And you really, it's a very strange sensation because you're suspending this breath cycle and the muscles, of course, are wanting to move. They're wanting to either expel or inhale, right? They're wanting to either get rid of the air or inhale, but you're resisting that. There's a little bit of a tug of war that's going to take place. And it's a good kind of tug of war because, again, it's going to strengthen these muscles around here. And you're going to learn to be able to coordinate your voice to more effectively pace your outgoing breath when you're singing vocal phrases. And then what you'll do is you'll start to apply this coordination to your exercises, your vocal training exercises, and to the songs that you're singing, to the vocal phrases. And you're going to inhale, and you're going to start to sing, but you're going to suspend that a little bit, that posture. Yes, air is coming out. Yes, you're exhaling, but you're going to hold on to that posture just a little bit longer so that you can mitigate those subglottal pressures. When I first started assigning this exercise to my students, I had kind of sort of a mixed feeling about it. I wasn't really completely passionate about it until I started seeing the benefits, until I started seeing within a very short time, within a couple weeks, the differences in the steadiness of their tone, the control, the vocal control that they had, and the beauty of their tone. Their voices started resonating more effectively, and the sound was so much better, not just steadier. Not only could they sustain tones for much longer, sing longer vocal phrases, but they had a much more resonant, beautiful tone. And so keep working at this exercise. Do it daily. I would suggest going through from your 4-4-4 count to your maximum and back down to the 4-4-4 count several times a day. It really only takes a couple minutes. It's a silent breathing exercise, so you can do this anywhere, anytime. You can do this exercise while you're on the city bus or subway. You can do it while you're commuting to work in your car, and nobody will know that you're doing it. You can sit on the couch. Well, the couch might not be the best because it's probably a little too soft and squishy for you to get good posture, but if you're able to get good posture, then you can sit there and do that exercise while you're passively watching television because you want to make sure that you're really focusing on the breath, pacing that breath, counting, very, very even, very consistent. Let me know how you do with this exercise, especially if you need any further guidance, and I'll do my very, very best to help you. In the meantime, please click the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, feel free to share this video with your singing friends, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in.